Joined by James Dorsey, who's a senior fellow at Singapore's S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, who we're going to speak to now. So hearing that 2 soldiers were killed in Iran during the strikes, that's some new information that we've had. Iran is launching an operation into the strikes. Do you think this response from Israel was perhaps more measured than you had expected, seeing as they struck just military bases?
Well, looking at the initial information as far as we have it, I think what we're seeing from both sides is restraint. With other words, the Iranians are saying that they have a right to respond. They have not said that they would respond. And even if they do respond, that response could be somewhere in the future. It does not need to be immediate. And on the Israeli side, they clearly have been heeding to American pressure and have been, in terms of what they could have done, restrained in their operations today. The Iranians are reporting 2 military casualties, not civilian casualties. So in that sense, the casualty figures are 1, very low, and 2, they are military. Some of the things that I think we need to look out for before we draw more definitive conclusions is an assessment on the Iranian part of whether damage was done to Iranian military facilities and to what extent. And the interesting part is that the Israelis have talked extensively about their decision-making process, but they haven't really talked about the military action in itself. And what I'm referring to here is if you look back at past discussions several years ago about a possible Israeli strike against Iranian nuclear facilities, something Netanyahu wanted at the time of U.S. President Obama, one of the issues was that the Israelis would not be able to fly to Iran and fly back without some sort of refueling. And the second question, of course, is that, assuming Israel's correct in that it used aircraft rather than drones, what route did they travel? Whose airspace did they travel through?
Well, James, many are saying they don't think Iran will respond. It seems that both sides at this point want to avoid an all-out war. What's your opinion? Do you think Iran will refrain from responding with perhaps a similar level of attack?
Well, I think what was definite is the Iranians do not want an all-out war. If anything, they want an end to the tit-for-tat. They don't want to run the risk of escalation. They want to see ceasefires in Lebanon and in Gaza. Now, having said that, that does not mean that, depending on the final assessment of what happened today, that the Iranians would not feel obliged to respond to Israel. But even if they do respond, despite the bluster that we've heard in recent weeks, I don't think that they would want to respond in a way that would escalate this into an all-out war.
And if they were to respond, I guess on that note, given they do have sort of strong military capabilities, are you saying that you think they wouldn't escalate it to another stage? They'd probably match it with a similar level of response?
Well, if you hear what they've been saying in recent days, what they've said is that they would match. That was already a difference to what they were saying before that, where they were talking about much harsher responses. So I think that if the Iranians feel that they need to respond, it will be a very carefully calibrated one. Keep one thing in mind, that at the end of the day, Iran has to the only thing it can rely on are its ballistic missiles and its non-state allies, who are particularly in Gaza and in Lebanon under extreme Israeli pressure. Iran does not have an air force of any renown. It does not have a navy of any significance because of the sanctions. So, and there's no land border between Iran and Israel. So ground troops don't make the difference here. And in that sense, it is at a disadvantage militarily with Israel.
And James, we do have ceasefire talks scheduled for this weekend. We've had Antony Blinken in the region over the past week, leading up to these negotiations. Do you think that they'll now be threatened following this latest action from Israel overnight?
I doubt it. We've known at the moment that the ceasefire negotiations or revival of the ceasefire negotiations, probably on Sunday in Doha, we've known that there was an imminent Israeli strike. The question was not whether it was going to be before or after the U.S. election. It was going to be before the U.S. elections and in the next week. The only answer we didn't have is what day of the week would this occur?